Well, Dr. Greer is my boss. It's my transition from, so you guys, some of you all know that I've been leading the same church for 32 years. And the blessing in that is that I'm about to get early release for good behavior. And, well, average behavior. So as I was starting my transition out, long story short, Dr. Greer had started a college some 10, now 11 years ago, and was looking for, he was serving as pastor of a major church and president of college. And so he asked me if I would come and serve as the president of the college. So, you know, this was one of those times where I just knew my wife was going to say no. So it's a done deal. You know, so there's nothing to pray about. Janine said no. So there's no need to seek God. So I go downstairs and I said, babe, what do you think about? And she says, you might want to really pray about that. That sounds like it might be in line with what God's doing with you. I'm like, really? But it was the Lord's doing. And so I've been for the last year and I've been with Bishop for 2 years. Well, we've been friends for several years. We are mutually accountable to one another. He is my friend and brother in ministry. He has permission to correct me when I get off, and he's given me the same permission with him as well. And so grateful for that. And I want to say this to you, sisters and brothers, too. You need friends in this. You can't do this by yourself. You need friends. David Martin is here with me today. Wave, Dave. That's David Martin. David Martin has been my friend since I was 31 years old, and I'm 62 now. So he's been putting up with me for 3 decades, challenging me as a father, a husband, and as a leader, and has even submitted himself to our network and said, hey, I want you to be my pastor, but he's kind of mine too. And we've served together for decades. And one of the things that even, especially you younger pastors, you want to, and not that it's too late for us old guys, but especially if you're young in this, you want friends. And you want lasting relationships. You don't want to be just, changing friends every time you get some new vision or new direction, or whatever. You want friendships that can stand the test of time, because your friendships say a lot about what kind of person you are, because you have to develop and mature in order to maintain friendships. It's absolutely critical. So being with Dr. Greer today is a real treasure for me, and I'm so grateful for his ministry and for him sharing. Now, he acted as if we kind of like we're bad cop, good cop, but that's so not true. What we are is super intelligent cop and just beat cop. That's kind of what we are. So I don't have any PowerPoints. I don't have any assessments. I have a zip. Okay, so you got all of that from the super intelligent, the cop that's got a PhD. So with me, this is GED level stuff. We're not. There's no PowerPoints. But I want to ask you a couple of questions. And Brandon and Casey, I love you all. I appreciate you all so very much. Thank you all for letting me come and be a part today. I want to ask you a question, and because it's kind of somewhat intimate, a little personal, I promise I'll answer first. So I want to know from you what things in your ministry and even personal life, but what things in your life are you clear on, and what things are you not so clear on? What things do you feel like you have clarity about? And what things do you not have clarity about? And I know we talk more about the clear stuff than we do the unclear stuff. That's why it stays vague, because we don't talk about it. So here's mine. This is easy. This is kind of easy for me. What I'm clear on is I'm clear on the fact that God called me to serve leaders. I am very clear on that. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's what God's called me to do. Here's what I'm unclear on. Am I the right guy for this? So my lack of clarity comes with a little bit of imposter syndrome. You know, I kind of walk in the room and start wondering, should I really be here? So that gets vague for me. And so if I just focus on what I'm clear on, that's fine. But if I don't ever address my insecurities, what I'm vague about, then that becomes a limiting factor for me. And I'll say more about that in a moment, but I wanted to see if anybody else is brave enough to jump into this conversation, because you can't give us your clear without giving us your unclear. That's not fair, because I already put myself out there, all online, globally and stuff. So what we're not going to do is now you're going to look like the hero. So give me something that you're clear on and something that you're not so clear on. Is it taking you a while to figure out what you might be clear on? Because I know you know something that you're unclear on. You can start with the unclear if you want. Come on, you don't even have to, it's not class. You don't have to raise your hand, just talk. We've been in Zoom for 3 years. We're used to talking over each other.
So I still have the same unclarity, if you will, with being an apostle.
Yeah, that same unclarity about, am I really prepared? Yeah, I kind of feel like I've set up a temple at the burning bush. Anybody else got something that you're clear on, something that you're not so clear on? Yeah.
Clear on my calling, and not clear on forward motion. What's next?
Next steps. Yeah, that's for us as leaders. And we can't act like that, because ain't nobody following you when you're like, I'm not sure what we're going to do next, y'all. So, but inside, if that's an area where you're a little vague, then you have to begin to kind of talk that through. Anybody else want to jump in here? No pressure. But at least one person from this side of the room.
I'm not a pastor,
You-
but I'm clear on
God bless you, sir.
I'm clear on the need to support our pastoral staff. I'm not clear on how best to do that.
Yeah.
And how to minister to our pastoral staff like they minister to you.
Yeah. And we're not real good at telling you how to support us either. So that's a really good one. How many of you would acknowledge that when you think about what you're clear on and what you're vague on, that a lot of your areas of vagueness come with this whole, what's the next step? What do we do? I kind of know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not sure specifically what to do next. You all would be amazed at the high level of percentage of vagueness that exists among leaders. Now, of course, let me augment that a little bit by saying, of course, we walk by faith and not by sight. And so we don't always see it all. But I'm not even asking the Lord to see it all. I just like to know what's next. I'm not trying to see the end. I just want to know, like, when I get off this platform, what do I do next? So that vagueness we carry, and because it's not discussed, then it almost becomes, and one of the things I'll try to warn you against a little bit today is it almost becomes an accepted norm to operate in vagueness. And you can see why oftentimes, because we carry that vagueness, that lack of clarity, you can see why many times we'll fill in the blank with something someone else is doing, or something we heard, or something that looks really cool, or something that's high tech, or man, I love, and that's not to say that we don't learn from each other, because we absolutely should. However, what I cannot learn from you is I cannot replace my vagueness with your clarity. I can't replace my vagueness with your clarity, because what was clear for you, when I try to put it in my space, doesn't necessarily become clear for me. So there's this whole process of then how do we manage, how do we increase clarity, and how do we manage those areas that are vague and that are unclear? So As we're in our church, we're in a theme called this whole year, Becoming More Like Jesus. So we're reading and teaching, preaching through the Gospels, and we're looking at Jesus. We started out with loving like Jesus. We're talking giving like Jesus. Now we're in living like Jesus. Hopefully, somewhat we'll talk a little bit even about leading like Jesus. But in this living like Jesus piece, I've just started to examine some of his interactions with people. Now, one of the interactions that I find that is interesting is how much story and detail there is around when Jesus heals blind people. Those are some of the most unique stories. If you'll read them, all of them are like that. You think about Bartimaeus, blind Bartimaeus, he's screaming at the top of his lungs, I want to be healed, I want to see. And people are like, shh. And he screams even louder. And Jesus heals him. It's absolutely amazing. Consider, visit John 9, the man born blind. The whole conversation with the disciples. Did his mom and dad sin? Okay, that's a reasonable question. Absolutely not. Well, did he sin? Jesus is like, that's dumb because he was born blind. So, what do you do? Pull the umbilical cord too hard. So it's like, so Jesus like, you guys are tripping. Nobody sinned. It happened for my glory. And then he does the whole little spit pie thing, with the dirt, puts on his head, makes him walk across town, wash it off. He comes back with perfect sight. And then, of course, Jesus, even when he announces his ministry, I came to bring sight to the blind. So what I'm thinking, because he always functions at this level that is beyond the realm of the natural, that these discussions about blindness are not just about the healing of a cornea or an iris or an optic nerve, that these discussions about blindness are discussions about the level of vagueness and lack of vision that we have in our lives, and which leads to a sense of insignificance that Jesus said, I came to heal that. So I didn't just come to get you saved. I get you saved so that now we can have a relationship and I can show you why I created you. Does that make sense to anybody? And so that's why I think there's a lot of conversation in the book about the folks that are blind being healed, because I think in every, and I don't have the time to teach on this, but I think in every setting there is some perspective of insignificance. There's some perspective of vagueness that's getting dealt with in the process of that person being healed. And so I want to read to you an incident of a healing of a blind person that I think could speak to leadership and the process of leadership. Mark 8, and I'm just going to read about 5 verses. When they arrived at Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man to Jesus, and they begged him to touch the man and heal him. Somewhere in your notes beside Bethsaida, just put house of fish, the house of fish. Jesus took the blind man by the hand. So I want y'all to notice all this detail. You really see so much detail in every story of when the blind are healed, because I think there's something else that he's trying to say to us. He takes the blind man by the hand, led him out of the village, then spitting on the man's eyes. And for those of you who are, maybe here, who are new to some of these stories, and you keep hearing about Jesus, he's spitting on people. Jesus doesn't have an issue. There's an actual biological reason why he's doing this, and I'll explain a little bit of that in a moment. So he spits on the man's eyes, and I promise you, we're not going to do any examples of that in this conversation. Just wanted you, just in case you got a little nervous, because if you didn't get that, don't worry about it. You don't need to. Then spitting on the man's eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked, can you see anything now? This is about to get super weird, y'all. So I want you to pay real close attention. Now, Jesus, not one of the disciples, Jesus, not Moses, Jesus just touched a man to heal him and asked, can you see anything now? And the man looked around and said, yes, I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. Now, how do you get touched by Jesus and you still ain't right yet? Kind of says that everything might be a process, even when Jesus is in it. I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. They look like trees walking around. How many of y'all pastors are people that you lead sometimes look like something else other than people? I see people, but they don't look like people right now. They look like trees. Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again, second time. And his eyes were opened. It didn't say that the first time. His eyes were opened. His sight was completely restored, and he could see everything clearly. Jesus sent him away saying, don't go back into the village on your way home. So here's my conjecture. Here's my hypothesis. And I'm still in the process of working this all out in my own spirit and in teaching you all as leaders. Here's what I believe. Bethsaida means house of fish. We're all, and this is the house of fish. We don't have time to do geography because I don't want Brandon to pull that cane out and kind of drag me off the stage. So I'm gonna move quick on this. So house of fish, it's a fishing place. Their thing is fishing. They're by the water. It's where they fish, and they bring the fish here to then process them to market. It's a house of fish. And so what I believe that the church is supposed to be a fishing place. I don't believe I think part of COVID and the lesson that God wanted to teach us was that for God, church does not mean having church. Church means being the church. And so when I shut down the having of church, it shouldn't change the being of church. So because we're called to fish, and you fish whether you can go to a building on Sunday or not. We're still fishing. We're still influencing. We're still expanding the kingdom. I think this is important because you are a sister or a brother who's a part of Bethsaida, who's a part of the house of fish. You're part of this fishing place, and there is a distinct call on your life. And here's what Jesus does is Jesus gets you, sister, or gets you, brother, by the hand, and he takes you away from the village. And so I want to just say quickly that all of you all have had an experience with God where you believe you were called to something. You had to be pulled away from the village. You had to get pulled away from the stuff and from friends and from family and from all the other things, concepts you had in your mind. Somehow Jesus has pulled you away, and he's pulling you away because he wants to give you an ability to see people clearly and understand clearly what your own call is. So even the whole spitting on his eyes. So he did the same thing with you. So here's what I believe about the whole spitting thing with Jesus. I believe that he used spit before he died on the cross, before he shed his blood. There's never a story of him using spit again after he's resurrected, or even the disciples. They didn't spit on people. So I'm not doing that. They didn't spit on people. So here's why I believe he used spit before he died, because if you've seen one good detective show, you know that DNA that's in the blood is also in the spit. Right? The DNA, RNA codes are in the saliva. I think all Jesus is doing is he's taking who he is and putting it on them. And once he puts his DNA on blindness, it's got to go. So, he actually put spit on a kid's tongue who couldn't talk, and boom, immediately he could talk. I believe that it's the same thing as putting his blood, but he hadn't shed his blood yet. So, Jesus he's just smart like that. Said, oh, well, I haven't shed blood yet, but I got spit. That's got the same DNA in it. The same thing that the blood does to cleanse, to heal, to deliver. The spit, my spit will do it too. That's all I need is just that. And it works. So he puts that DNA on you, and he makes you a leader, and he calls you to something. And now, for the first time, you start to see. But what I want to do is I want to give you permission to be able to admit, I see, but I don't always see clearly. Because even after an interaction with Jesus, the man didn't see clearly. He's still waiting for clear vision. So you could be called to lead. And that doesn't mean just be a pastor, but whatever you're called to do, you can be called to lead, have been genuinely touched by God. Your life has been changed. You've been pulled away from the crowd. You've been giving something unique in your heart, but you still might not have complete clarity about what all of that is. What I would like to suggest to you is that a part of what keeps us dependent upon Him is our need for greater clarity. Because I am convinced, now you guys are probably much more spiritual than me, but I'll say for me, if there wasn't a little bit of vagueness, I probably would think I got this and would just keep doing what I think I know to do because I got this. I see exactly what I'm supposed to do. But my lack of clarity brings me back for another experience with Jesus. See, this guy had an experience with Jesus, but the fact that I got something from you, Jesus, it is better. I've never seen this well before, but since I've never seen before, I've never had this bad a vision before either. Because I've never seen anything. So he went from no vision to bad vision. The problem with bad vision is you can get into a lot of trouble because you think you can see. And you can feel like I can do this myself because I can see a little bit now. Oftentimes for us as leaders, because we've had that interaction with Him where He called us, we can see, but we don't see clearly. And all right, so this guy has a bit of an advantage on us because he doesn't have 25 T.D. Jakes messages. He doesn't have 14 books on leadership. He doesn't even have John Maxwell. He is really out back. So this guy, when Jesus asked him, how's it working for you? He's like, well, I appreciate it. I'm doing better, but man, it ain't good because these folks look like trees to me. But with us, with all this time we've been in church, for us, it's going to be real hard for us to admit to Jesus, I know you're Jesus, I know you're great, and you just touched me, but I'm really not seeing very well, even after you touched me. That's a hard thing for us to admit because we think we should be further along than we are. So let me stop and say this to you. Oftentimes, the idea that we think we should be further along is what keeps us from being further along. Because as long as I think I should be further along, I will never admit when I'm not further along. And if I can't admit where I am, I can never get to where He wants to take me. Somebody calls you up and says, hey, I'm on my way to your house, but I'm not sure how to get there. What's the first question you ask them? Where are you? If they can't tell you where they are, there's no way you can give them directions because all directions have to start somewhere. That's why the psalmist says he's a lamp to my feet, then a light to my path. Because ain't no need of looking at the path if you don't know where your feet are. So you got to understand where your feet are before you can see light on your path. And the light on your path is not going to do anything but confuse you if you don't know where your feet are. It doesn't matter how great my directions are on how to get to the house. If you don't know where you are, I can't get you here if you don't know where you are. So what I'm kind of wondering sometimes, sisters and brothers, is that I wonder if there are times when we've had this amazing experience where the Lord has called us and then we don't see it clearly, but because we're leading other people, we got to fake it. We got to act clear when we're not. You know, and here's one of the challenges I think with leadership. If you keep acting clear long enough, you'll actually deceive yourself. And you won't have that second conversation with Jesus that says, I'm so glad you pulled me out of that village. I'm so glad you spit on my eyes. That was nasty, but I'm grateful. I'm so glad you did it, man. I'm so glad to be able to see. However, I'm at a place today Jesus, where I'm not clear about some things and I need some additional clarity. So let me just give you just a couple things to think about, and then I'll be done. So do not accept lack of clarity as the norm. Just because all of us have some doesn't mean that's what God wants for us. What I love about Jesus and this interaction with this blind fellow is that he didn't say, you know, when the guy says, I can see, but I don't see well, he didn't say, hey, that's better than what you had. Just, you know, who's next? You know, no. He said, come here. He says, I'm going to touch you again. So a phrase, we hear a phrase in the text that we don't hear before. He says, then his eyes were opened. So what it speaks to is fully restored vision. So how many of you all know that the enemy, the greatest enemy of great is not bad. The greatest enemy of great is good. You understand what I mean when I say that? That the greatest enemy to great is good, because we're not going to accept bad in place of great, but we might accept good in place of great. So my vision, it is better. It ain't good. I still can't get a driver's license. I see just enough to get in trouble. Because now I'm no longer having somebody lead me by the hand, because now he's touched me and I can see. So now I've been promoted to leadership because at least I can see something. But leadership at its best requires clear vision. So don't accept unclear as the norm. Now, I'm going to say something, and I'm asking you, please don't be offended or insulted. I know some of you, many of you all are very experienced. You're like me. You know, you've been saved since Adam was a lad. So I get that. But I'm going to say it to you again. Pursue Jesus for more. One of the things that I often fear with us as leaders is that the same pursuit we teach about, we may not have it. And so I want to challenge you to be in pursuit of Jesus for another experience. I'm not talking about an experience to brag about, or an experience that's, flashing lights and that kind of thing. But I mean an experience with him to where I say, Lord, you know what? I thank you for calling me. I thank you for where you've placed me in leadership. I thank you for the responsibilities you've given me. But there are areas where I lack clarity and I need it. I had to come to the place where, with my own insecurities, that I was willing to admit them and get him, Jesus, and my friends that I'm accountable to help me address my insecurities. Because that area of vagueness became a limiter for where I could go. There's certain places that Jesus couldn't send me because I was my worst enemy. I kept getting in my own way. I said kept like I'm over that now. I keep getting in my own way. So I talk myself out of what he's saying or what he's doing. And that's not my only issue. That's just one of the major ones. But having the opportunity to go back to him and say, Lord, I need your help on this. Here's another thing I want to suggest to you. I want to suggest that you stop blaming yourself. I had somebody on my staff say this to me a few years ago because I was always trying to figure out whose fault it was. And I had somebody on my staff say to me, he said, you're trying to find somebody to blame? but is that going to fix anything? And they were right. Wasn't going to fix it. Wasn't going to fix a thing. So at some point, you got to stop blaming you for that and go ahead and say, hey, this is where I am. Rather than me playing really, and blaming yourself is really kind of a pride game. Instead of playing that pride game of blaming yourself and trying to feel deep because I'm the cause of this. Okay, we heard that. Cool. Now let's go to the one who can fix it. And let's put the focus on the fix. Jesus tells the guy, he says, now don't go back to the village. I want to encourage you, don't go back to village thinking. Don't go back to what is common. Don't go back to the norm. Be the woman or the man who says, you've called me, you've put your DNA on my eyes, I see what I've never seen before, and I'm growing in clarity. I don't want to settle for anything less than what you've brought in my life. I want clear vision. I want to see well. And when I don't see well, I want the level of humility and transparency that enables me to say, God, thank you for what you've done. This does not come from a heart of ingratitude, but I'm super grateful for everything. But in this area, I see men like trees, and I know that's not the way I'm supposed to see it. I want to see clear. And I'm certain of this, folks, that prayer is a prayer that God will answer. Anybody here want greater clarity? I do. I'm desperate for greater clarity, even as an old guy, in my 60s. But I want greater clarity. I don't want to, I think it's the coolest thing when Caleb says, it's his birthday, and Caleb says, hey, y'all, check me out. I'm 80 today. I'm just as strong as I was 40 years ago. And I can see just as well as I could see then. That's a pretty cool testimony for an 80-year-old fella. Huh? And he's actually telling the truth, and he proves it. He go whip some giants and takes land and says, hey, if y'all thought I was lying, watch this. They say that's the 4 most dangerous words from a East Tennessee country boy. Hey, y'all, watch this. That's what Caleb said. Hey, y'all, watch this. And he did it because he absolutely lived and died with clarity. So I don't have time to teach the things that you'll need some things for that. You'll need some friends who you're accountable to. You'll need some leadership that you're accountable to. You'll need to be that lifelong learner. And you'll have to be honest enough to check yourself on a regular basis and allow other people to do that with you. And then you'll have to be honest with Jesus about where you are. So if you've got questions, and I hope you do, we'll address that in a minute. Let me pray for those of you who want greater clarity. Father, in Jesus' name, I come along with my sisters and brothers. I'm in the prayer line with them. And I'm saying, Lord, I want greater clarity. I'm so grateful for what you've already shown me and for what I've already seen and what I'm seeing. I'm so grateful for that. But I absolutely know there's more. I absolutely know that there's greater that you want to do with my life, with our lives. So, Lord, I just bring us all to you. And I say, Lord, touch us again. Put in us a pursuit for a continual experience with you where clarity increases over time, and that is vague is minimized over time. Now, Lord, we are grateful for how you sometimes use the vagueness to keep us coming to you and running to you, and we in no wise want that to change. But Lord, in those areas where you want to clarify some things and you just need us to ask, we're asking. And we're thanking you in advance for doing it. In Jesus' name, amen.